Well, good morning and welcome to Friendship Church. My name is Brandon and I'm the director of student ministries here at Friendship. And last week, I got the privilege of starting a series here called Contrast. And we're finishing it up today, looking at the lives of the rich young ruler and of a man named Zacchaeus, and kind of contrasting and showing the differences between these two people. And if you remember, last week we looked at all these differences and how they're so different. And the reality is, it's easier to look at their similarities because the only thing that we see that's similar about these two people is that they're both filthy rich. Like, beyond our imagination, filthy rich. And so you look at it, on the one hand, you have the rich young ruler. By all accounts, he loves his money. He's got tons of money. And if he was living today, I want to imagine if he was living today, he would have so much money, like it's a part of his presence, and you can realize that and see that. He'd be the person that would drive with a fancy Ferrari sports car, like the one with that is the convertible, super fast, drives 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds or something like that. Of course, it's a Ferrari, so it's bright red car. And the car you can just drive down the interstate and just really enjoy the ride. The one that you probably will never be in, but the one we always look at and just kind of gawk at. The one that's so expensive. Of course, this guy has so much money, that's just one of his cars. That's his daily driver. He's got all these other cars in his mansion at home. He's got his 10-car garage with a bunch of classic cars. He's the guy who has it all. The guy who wears the right clothing. It's the Louis Vuitton clothing. That's way too expensive for a t-shirt. It's the Prada sunglasses or the gold Rolex watch. Or maybe it's the 200-foot super yacht that he gets to drive or sail around the world with. The reality is this. He's the person that's got it all. He's got all of the money, and when people see him, they see it on his face. They see it in everything that they have, or that they see him in. And of course, money isn't just money. Money leads to other things, right? Money leads to influence and to power. He's got so much money, he's got people walking around following him, hearing everything because they want the handouts, right? They want the little bit of scraps that he's going to drop around because he's got money flying out everywhere. And so when he has a question, his personal assistants, they come up and they try to give an answer as quickly as possible. But it doesn't just lead to him having things. It also leads to him having comfort, right? Because if you have this kind of money, you can have anything that you want, right? You can have all the comforts of life. And of course, you can have freedom. Because if this guy wants to go and spend a month down, 2 months, 6 months down in Mexico, he just can. Or maybe he gets tired of people, and so he buys himself a private island, right? He can get away from anyone and anything he wants to because he's got freedom. He can travel in any way he wants to. He does not have to take a car anywhere he doesn't want to. He doesn't have to do public transportation. If he wants to fly to another country, he's got his own plane. He can just go. Because he's got the freedom and the power and the money to do it all. And when you look at this guy, he's got it all. And so this is the guy that comes up to Jesus. And on the other side, you've got Zacchaeus, who in a lot of the same ways has a lot of the same kind of money. He's got all sorts of money, but while the rich young ruler got this money legitimately through, maybe it was his family or maybe it was his job or whatever it may have been, he got his money legitimately. Zacchaeus got his money illegitimately. Zacchaeus stole, bribed, cheated, got it any way he could. What we know about Zacchaeus is that he's the chief tax collector. And you don't make it to the chief tax collector position without stealing, bribing, and cheating your way there. You don't make it there without betraying everyone and everything that you have other than money. Because for Zacchaeus, there was nothing he would not do to get more money. He's the common criminal mastermind. He's got an army of people underneath his thumb. He's got the military. He's got the police because he pays them all off. If you speak bad against this guy, he will get you arrested and faster than you can know what to do. He's literally doing anything and everything he can to get his money. And then one day, he comes across a man named Jesus. He comes across a man named Jesus, and he shakes up their world. He shakes up this world. As we're looking at this passage, we're going to find this truth, this big idea, is that encountering Jesus always demands a choice. See, both of these men encounter Jesus, and they're both left with a choice. They've got two choices. On the one hand, their choice is to follow Jesus, which will ultimately leave them in a situation of joy. Or the other opportunity, the other choice that they can make is a choice of heartbreak, a choice of following self. And as we look at this story, we'll find that not only do these two men have that choice, but the reality is that each and every one of us have the same choice. Each and every one of us have that choice. And I want to kind of show and dig in and understand that when we encounter Jesus, it's not that we have a choice that we can make. It's that we are going to make a choice, and it's going to be one of these two things. And so on the one side, you have the rich young ruler. He is a man who comes up to Jesus, and he just wants to ensure that he's going to heaven. Because remember, he's this religious guy. He follows God. He's done all these things. And he says, hey, I have followed the law all my life. And so Jesus says, hey, follow the law. He's like, I've been doing that. And then Jesus, knowing that this guy didn't understand it, because the reality is the law was never meant for the purpose of being able to fulfill it. The law was never given to the Jews, to us, to show, hey, you can be good enough on your own. The whole purpose of the law is the idea that you aren't good enough. And it's to show us that we need someone more. And so this guy said, hey, I have followed the law. I've done it all. I'm good enough on my own. And Jesus saw that, and he said, hey, no, you've made yourself God. You've made your capabilities God. You've made your money God. And so he points and he pushes in and he says, hey, I'm going to dig a little deeper. I want to look at that here in Mark chapter 10, verse 21 and 22. And it says, looking at the man, Jesus felt genuine love for him. And there's still one thing that you haven't done, Jesus told him, or he told him, go and sell all of your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. And you can look at his response to that. And as this man's face fell, he went away sad, for he had many possessions. And here's the thing. Jesus wasn't asking this guy to give away some of his stuff. He wasn't saying, hey, I know you've got a golden chariot that you pulled around by, 2 horses. I know you've got all this stuff. I know you've got a beautiful mansion back at home. I know you've got all this money and all this great clothes. He wasn't saying, hey, give your stuff away. I mean, that wasn't kind of the point. He wasn't saying, hey, give away your power, give away your authority. What he was saying was give away your God. Give away what you have placed in your life in between me and you. Give away what is so valuable to me or to you so that you can follow me. That's what Jesus was saying. And when this guy heard it, when the rich young ruler heard it, his face fell. And he said, I can't do it. I can't give away that God. It is too valuable. It's worth too much to me. And he walked away sad. And then on the other side of this whole conversation, the other guy, Zacchaeus, is a very different response. But before we get to that, I want to understand that it's not just that sometimes if we're super rich or we have all this power or we have all these things, that these things become gods. The reality is for so many of us, it's so easy to allow things to become gods in our own life. Because he chose self. And maybe we don't have the super fancy sports car. Maybe we don't have the mansion. And maybe we don't have all that stuff, but we can still have gods. Maybe for us, it's the work. It's the approval from our boss that is what drives us in our life. Maybe it's family. It's approval from our spouse or approval from our kids or approval from the next door neighbor who sees us and we were trying to show off how good our family is. Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's the boyfriend or girlfriend or the husband or wife or, just the friendships that we want to prove to the world that we're good. Maybe it's the money and success. And it's not that we have that much money, but we're trying to get more money than we currently have. We'd be happy and satisfied if we had more. Maybe it's comfort. Maybe it's sports and cheering on the right team and making sure your team through our cheering through the TV, your team is successful, or maybe it's that we live through our kids in their sports. And we live vicariously, and it's like, hey, if my kid is successful in sports, and if they get the scholarship to college, then I will be a success. Or maybe it's time or security. All these things become and can become gods in our lives. And when we choose these things over God, that is when we are left heartbroken. That's when we have issues, because choosing self over God always leads to heartbreak. Choosing anything other than God always leads to heartbreak, because it never fulfills. It never fills us up. It never satisfies. It always leaves us wanting, because self isn't the right God. And so you have the rich young ruler, but you also have a man named Zacchaeus. And we read this and we see his interaction in Luke chapter 19, and in verse 8, it says, "Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord. And if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times. I don't understand how this math works out. Just going to put that there. Because it seems like, I don't know. The math doesn't work with my head, but that's fine. What we see here is that Zacchaeus gives away a lot of stuff, right? But what I think is crazy, what we don't see here is we don't see Jesus asking him to. Right, because that's the contrast, right? We see that in the rich young ruler. Jesus comes up to him and says, hey, you need to give away your money. But he doesn't do that to Zacchaeus. He doesn't challenge him to do that. He doesn't point at it. He doesn't say, you have to do it. But Zacchaeus did it because when he saw Jesus, all the way back in that sycamore tree, he recognized there's something wrong. He recognized, he saw in his own life that he had put money over God, that he had put this thing as a life and it didn't fulfill him. It didn't satisfy him, and he needed more. He needed something different. See, the contrast between Zacchaeus and the rich young ruler is that Zacchaeus saw this was a God in his life. It was an idol, that it was in between him. And the rich young ruler, Jesus had to go and tell him that it was a God. And so Zacchaeus, he gave it up and said, I'm going to give away everything because I know this is separating. I know that this is hindering me. I know that this is making me not follow God. And so he gave it up, and when he did that, he found joy. Because while choosing self always leads to heartbreak, choosing God always leads to joy. When we put away the things that are stopping us and hindering us and preventing us from getting to God and that relationship with him, we are filled with joy. Now, side note here real quick. Joy, it's not happiness. Joy is not ease. Look at this story. The person who kept all his money, who kept all the ease of life, he left heartbroken. But the person who gave it all away, he left with joy. So joy isn't easiness in this life. It's not a life of money. It's a life of saying, hey, I am in a relationship with God. I know that no matter what happens on this earth, that I am going to still be in this relationship with God. I know what my future's like. That I'm going to be with God, that he's got it all there. I know God is living with me and guiding me, and he's there. That's what leads to joy, is that knowledge. So you look at all this stuff, you realize that our joy or heartbreak is found in our choices. Our joy or heartbreak is found when we choose between ourselves and our God and God. It's found when we make that decision to say, hey, I'm going to follow God versus man or versus myself. We see this story, and we see all this in the story about the reaction and how we can find joy and heartbreak. But I also think it's cool when you look at this story is you see Jesus' joy and heartbreak. You see Jesus responding to these people and kind of having interaction or having a response to that. Let's look at Jesus' response to the rich young ruler in Mark chapter 10, verse 21. It says, looking at this man, Jesus felt genuine love for him. See, you feel the pain, you feel the heartbreak. Not only does this rich young ruler's decision to choose himself cause him heartache or heartbreak, it also causes God heartbreak. It also causes Jesus heartbreak because he realizes that the only thing that's good that's going to come to this man's life is if he chooses God. And he realizes he's broken because he's like, man, this guy is denying the only thing that's good, and you find and you see Jesus' heart in that. And that's the heart of Jesus, is that when we deny him, when anyone denies him, he is broken over it. He wants us all to come and know and have a relationship with Jesus. So you see in the rich young ruler's response, the heartbreak, but in contrast, you see the joy in Zacchaeus' response, right? Luke chapter 19, verses 9 and 10. Jesus responded, "Salvation has come to this house or this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save those who were lost." And for many, maybe you're asking, like, how does salvation come to this man? Was it his actions? What was it that caused him to be saved? Because it doesn't really specify, it doesn't really show us. But there's a theme all throughout the Bible, New Testament and Old Testament, that it's not about your actions, it's about your faith. That salvation comes through faith. That's the theme that we see all throughout the Bible. But there's also another thing that we find, is that when you have faith in God, your actions change. See, Zacchaeus wasn't saved by his choosing to give away his money, but because he was saved, he said, hey, I'm going to give away all of this stuff because it stops me, it hinders me, it prevents me from a true relationship, from really connecting and communicating and really following after God. See, true faith always leads to action, but Zacchaeus was saved before that. It wasn't his saving that was giving his money away. He was saved because he seeked after God. He climbed up in that tree to look and see God and really believe that Jesus was going to save him. And so that's when he found salvation. That's when it all started. That journey was then when he climbed up in that tree. And God and Jesus gave Zacchaeus a choice that he had honestly probably denied many, many times before. A choice that this guy had continually gone against all of his life. But he was given a choice to follow God or a choice to follow self. And the reality is we've all been given this choice because the reality is we've all messed up. We've all done things that have been wrong, and these wrong things called sin that separates us from Jesus Christ. It breaks that relationship. It stops us from having joy in life. All these mistakes. But later on, if you continue in the Gospels, you'll find that Jesus goes on to sacrifice his life on a cross, to die, to be buried, and to raise again, so that he could save us, so he could defeat sin, so he could defeat death, so that we could have that relationship restored. The only reason that we can have any of this, the only reason that we can have any joy is because of what Jesus would later do. And the truth is that Jesus is presenting that to us. Maybe you're in this room and you've never heard it laid out quite this way. Maybe you've never seen it as a presenting of a choice between God and self, or maybe you're in this room and you've heard it for years, maybe even decades. You've heard it time and time again. The truth is that Jesus is still presenting that option for you. He's still presenting you with this choice, a choice between self and God. And I want to give everyone in this room an opportunity, a chance to make this choice. To make this choice because it's the most important choice, and it's the starting choice that we can make. Now, I'm going to lead in a prayer in a moment, but it's not the prayer that saves you. Because again, it's not action, it's faith. It's not the words that save you, but it's belief in those words. It's belief in God and what Jesus has done for us that saves you. But the reason that we lead a prayer, the reason that I would lead in a prayer is because it kind of solidifies, it kind of makes it easy to understand, right? It makes it easy for us to understand what we're saying we believe in. It's what the Bible tells us. So if you're in this room and you're like, man, I want to make that choice. Today, I want to make that choice. I want to give you an opportunity. So I want everyone to bow their heads and close their eyes as we lead in this prayer. And remember that this prayer is not a prayer between you and anyone else in this room. It's a prayer between you and God. So if this is the choice that you want to make today, it's a prayer between you and God. And so if you want to make that choice, pray something like this to God. God, I know that I'm a sinner. And I know that my sin has separated me from God. And I know that Jesus died and rose again to defeat sin. And I know that by believing in Jesus and who he is and what he's done, I can be saved. My relationship can be restored with God, and I can have joy in my life because of that. And I commit to choosing to follow Jesus for the rest of my life. Amen. You guys can look up again, and if you made that decision today, if you made that choice today, I'm going to ask you to be somewhat bold this morning. And before you leave, in the seat back in front of you, there's a Connect card. There's a spot there where you can put, hey, I have made that decision, because what we want to do is help you out on that journey that's from now for the rest of your life. That journey that is from now to the rest of your life, that's growing in your relationship with Jesus, that's choosing to follow Jesus. And I'd ask that you be so bold to fill that out and drop it in the connection boxes on the way out so that we can connect with you and help you on that journey, because that's what we want to do. But maybe you're in this room and you're like, man, I did not make that choice, but I don't know if I'm not ready yet. Well, we'd encourage you to ask questions, to get more understanding of that, because this is the most important choice. This is the starting choice in your relationship with Jesus. But maybe you're in this room and you're like, man, I have made that decision. I made that decision. Maybe it was weeks ago, maybe it was months ago, maybe it was years ago, or maybe it was decades ago. It was a long time ago. But since that point, there's been times in my life in which I realized that, you know what? I've gone back to choosing myself. I've gone back to choosing my own desires, my own will, my own way. I've stopped choosing God and I've started choosing self again. And the reality is that choosing Jesus isn't a one-time thing. We choose Jesus to start our relationship with him, but then we've got to continually choose Jesus each and every day. Each and every moment, each and every second, we've got to continue to choose Jesus. And so when you're looking at your life and you're like, man, there is this thing that I have chosen over God, that I have put above God, my challenge for you is to say, hey, take a look at that, eliminate that, stop that from being your God, because whenever we choose self, we choose heartbreak and not joy. And so my challenge is to choose Jesus every day in your life. Or maybe you've just lost that joy of salvation. When you look at Zacchaeus, he's excited when he gave up that money, right? When he gave up that stuff. You can tell that Zacchaeus really changed because of the way he did that. Have you ever been around a 3-year-old and you tell them to go and share a toy? I've got a 3-year-old back home. And we've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and he is told to go and share, and he does that very well. He goes with the toy that he has, and he goes and gives it to his brother. And then immediately falls to the ground screaming and crying because he no longer has a toy, right? Because that's not true. That's not true repentance. That's not true change. But we see in Zacchaeus is that he has joy in it. He gave away his money and he's happy about it. And maybe we used to have that. When we were first saved, we had that joy. But now we're like, man, I wish I did. And I think the only way for us to get back to that joy is to ask God, to say, God, bring back that joy of salvation. Bring back that joy that I once had when I was saved, when I first experienced God, when I was on this major, or maybe it was later, and I had this experience with God again, and it changed me, and it started that passion again. Give me back that passion for choosing God. But it all boils down to this. We're all on a crossroad. Every day is a crossroad. Every day we have a choice. Do we go left or we go right? Do we choose ourselves and heartbreak, Or do we choose God and joy? And so the question isn't, do you have a choice? The question is this: what choice will you make? Or maybe put it this way: what choice will you continue to make each and every day? Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you. We thank you so much for giving us these two stories. Stories about a man named Zacchaeus and about a man named the rich young ruler. These stories that show us the choice between self and you. And I pray that we will have the desire, the passion, the heart of Zacchaeus, that we are eager to follow you and to serve you. That we are willing to give up anything, any idol, any god that stands between us and you. God, I pray that we can be like Zacchaeus. That we can clearly see the idol, the thing that might be between us and you. But God, if we're not like Zacchaeus, if we don't see it, I pray that like the rich young ruler, you will step into our lives and you will show us and you will make clear what we need to get rid of. What is stopping us from experiencing joy in a relationship with you. So God, give the people in this room, give us all joy of salvation, joy to follow you, to choose you each and every day. Restore in us the desire to follow and to serve and to love you. But God, we thank you for changing our lives. We thank you that when we interact with you, we are forever changed. We thank you that we are no longer the same and can't be the same after seeing you. Change us to be more like you, to love you more, to experience the joy that's found in salvation. We love you, God. We're thankful for everything that you've given us. We pray all this in your name. Amen.